I thought it had to be a podcast.
Can you
now
act
it
like an
doesn't have
adult?
to be a podcast.
Can you act like an adult? That is the most childish thing
How
I've
is
ever
it?
seen in my whole life.
You gave me the criteria.
The criteria is the content creators, including Myron Gaines. Yes, I've always said that. So, Nothing's changed in my statement.
As we're talking about dating podcasts, or
Correct.
the idea of dating,
Correct.
Is it also possible there's just not that many?
Andrew Wilson calmly but powerfully dismantles a long list of accusations about the red pill community, so-called misogynistic podcasts, and dating show dynamics. The opponent attempts to overload the discussion with emotionally charged examples, but Andrew Wilson stays focused, logical, and composed. He challenges vague definitions, calls out hypocrisy, and exposes the shallow talking points being repeated without substance. What unfolds is a masterclass in intellectual composure under pressure, Andrew Wilson style. Let's watch as Andrew Wilson annihilates this woke soy boy.
The only way that message is really disseminated is often through these big content creators. Most of the people come across the red pill from things like Fresh and Fit, Andrew Tate, this channel. That's how that packet is distributed, and there are prescriptive messages.
How did they come across it?
I don't know. The internet is the internet. The algorithm.
Do you think they made it up?
Do I think who made it up?
That those red pill creators that you're talking about, do you think that they just made all that stuff up?
No, I don't. I think there's too many similar messages for it to be made up.
Yeah, so there's like sources for this stuff, right?
Wherever they're sourcing it from, I'm not sure, but they're disseminating
so like one
it.
such source would be a guy, his name is Rollo Tomasi, the godfather of the red pill. He's going to be pissed that I said that because it's like an ongoing meme, but he calls it a praxeology, right? So if it's praxeological from his perspective, he's saying there's no prescriptions here, right? It's not designed around prescriptors. It's designed around descriptors. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to criticize the red pill, you should probably start by criticizing the descriptors. But if you wanted to criticize individual content creators for their prescriptions, I think that that's fine, but that's not the red pill. The red pill is a data packet of descriptions which are trying to express and explain interpersonal sexual dynamics between men and women.
I think the gentleman you mentioned, most people haven't heard of. I think most people
have heard of them.
I think most of the people are getting their information from the millions of subscriptions to Fresh and Fit and whatever. And
Fresh and Fit, he goes on often. They have a very close
Myron
relationship.
Gaines, I'm sure, is much more popular than him.
Yeah, well, the thing is like, maybe, but Myron Gaines is not are you saying he's the red pill?
I think he's one of them.
Okay, so what is, let's start with that. What is the red pill?
I consider it content that claims to reveal the truth about women but promotes misogyny and male victimhood.
Okay, so you think that the descriptors do that?
I think the content creators that are prescribing what the red pill is.
So it's about content creators.
Sure.
You just think that, so there's just content creators who you disagree with their message.
The majority of the red pill content creators, I disagree with their message.
Well, well, what's the majority? Like, how many do you think there are?
The most popular of the bunch. The ones that have the most viewers, subscribers.
Okay, so who are these guys that you're talking about?
Fresh and Fit is a big one. Andrew Tate is another one. And the Whatever Podcast is another one.
Fresh, Fit, Tate, and Whatever. So here's an easy one. I guess let's start with Whatever because I'm pretty familiar with the content here. So what is the message that's being put out there?
There's a lot of misogynistic messages that come out of this podcast, and
let's start with what is misogyny?
Misogyny is the hatred or dislike of women, the active dislike of women.
Plural women.
Yeah, correct. The entire gender.
So not the active dislike of a woman.
No, not typically.
So it's just women.
Yeah.
Okay. So misogyny is the active hatred or dislike of women.
Yeah.
Got it. All right.
And Fresh and Fit is another big culprit of that.
Let's start with Whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. So what is the misogyny or the dislike of women, which is promoted on this channel?
It's presented as a dating podcast, but it's really not. The topics that typically come up on this podcast. With that.
What makes it not a dating podcast?
I'm about to go into that.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
A dating podcast should not discuss whether or not women should be submissive, whether women should vote. On Sunday's show, you ask women how many pumps after they tell you to stop is it grape. That's not a dating podcast. That's one of the craziest questions I've ever heard. You basically say divorce hurts men, marriage is pointless. I don't know how that's helping your audience. I don't know how military conscription has anything to do with a dating podcast. I don't know how, guests being shown a submissive ex-girlfriend and saying, would you bow to your husband? Would you bow to your husband? That's not a dating podcast. That is promoting hatred of women and misogyny as well. Female guests are pressured to reveal their body count and then mocked. If they don't reveal, they're interrogated until they reveal. Women with OnlyFans are moralized and told to quit. Male promiscuity is excused and celebrated. Women are asked about their peak looks, age, and questioned incessantly. Segments like Man, Bear versus Woods mock women's very real fears about male violence, even though statistical realities are ignored and dismissed as irrational. The super chat roast. The guests love to shit on these women every chance they get. And on this show, feminism and women are blamed for most of men's problems.
Can I have do you have a copy of that? I'd like to see it, the thing. Because you just shotgunned a bunch of points, and Andrew, you want to go
you can have it
one by one?
I also have peer-reviewed studies if you want those too.
Yeah, if you have any, especially if they have a meta-analysis, I'd like to see them.
And just to before you give your response, Andrew, my understanding here for the debate was primarily going to be about feminism, not specific criticisms of the.
Well, I mean, this
podcast,
is
the prompts were about manosphere and red pill.
Yeah, so this is, I'm actually fine with this, right? So, why it's not really a dating podcast, whether women should be submissive, why, I don't understand. Why would that not be relational to dating?
What does submission have to do with dating?
Well, because dating is, especially on a dating show, you would be significantly talking about people's preferences when it came to the social experiences they're having with the opposite sex.
You're not talking about your preferences, you're talking about their preferences? Because when you talk about submission, you're talking about from your worldview, women should be submissive.
Okay, but from their worldview, they could also have maybe a counter to that why they shouldn't, or also a lot of them say, yes, they should. So the idea here for submission especially would be, I don't see how that's not dating related.
I don't know how submission comes up on any sort of date. I don't know if you've ever been on a date in the last 20 years.
So, okay, so if I ask you, what type of woman do you want? Mm-hmm. And you go through the traits and you say, I'd also like a submissive woman. Does that make sense to say as a trait?
Sure. I don't know many people that would just offer that up as one of the first things they want in a woman, but maybe those are the people you hang out with.
Who said it's the first? If I'm
if you ask somebody.
If I'm asking what's your dynamic and one of the answers is a submissive woman.
Yeah.
That comes up all the time for men in dating.
Okay. In your circles, perhaps.
I mean, no, just in how many dating podcast sample sizes do you have here?
I'm on a dating podcast. I made one. I listen to a lot of your shows. I listen to a lot of everything that's out there.
I don't understand any of the dating podcasts that come up when you ask men their preference. They've never once says, I would prefer to have a woman who's more submissive.
The topic of submission only comes up on Red Pill podcasts.
No, it doesn't only come up on
Where else does it come up?
It's been on Dr. Phil. It's been everywhere.
Dr. Phil talks about submission every episode. Every episode?
I didn't say every episode.
Well, that's what we're talking about here.
Is he doing a dating podcast every
don't mention
episode?
Dr. Phil as a dating show then. Don't mention Dr. Phil as a dating show. That's not a dating show.
You asked where else it's
Dr.
mentioned.
Phil as a dating show. That is not a dating show.
Yeah, so in any case, any of the dating podcasts that I've seen, it's a very common answer to say that they want to
name another dating podcast.
And here's the other thing to dive into this.
Name another dating podcast.
Here's the other thing to dive into this.
Well, you got to name another dating podcast.
Okay, Fresh and Fit happens there all the time.
Red Pill content, exactly as I said.
Okay, so when you're talking about a dating podcast, what do you mean by that?
Something a little less, I don't know, misogynistic, perhaps.
What does that mean, though?
I've already explained it to you and defined it.
If any man has a dating podcast, is it Red Pill or misogynistic?
I have a dating podcast and it's not misogynistic.
I see. And let me ask you a question. What kind of questions do you ask on your dating podcast?
I ask them, what are their priorities in a man? I asked them, do you have advice for men in dating?
How many men have you had on?
0. It's called Women on Men.
Oh, I see. So you're a misandrist?
Absolutely not.
Well, I don't understand. Why don't you want a man's opinion?
Because I want to ask women specifically. That has nothing. Misandry involves hate, and I don't hate men.
Oh, okay. I got it. So you only have on women.
Correct.
And you don't ask them, when you ask them about preferences.
Yeah.
Right? Do they say that they want things like assertive men?
No.
Do they say that they want less assertive men?
I give them a list of 10 traits and say rank these between your top 3 and your bottom 3.
Okay, so you're giving them the answers.
I'm not giving them the answers. They take a lot of time to think about it.
But you just said you gave him 10 traits.
Yeah, that's not the answers. Those are options.
Yeah, that's answers that are options you can choose from. It's a multiple choice.
That's not answers.
Yes, it's answers.
Okay, they're answers, Andrew.
Yeah, you gave them 10 answers and say, choose from
and
these.
And then they sort them. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that's their answers.
You're making them choose from answers that you give them.
Okay.
So you're literally feeding them their answers, and then they choose them.
Yep. And they don't come and say, man, I wish you would have had this on the list.
Why is it then? Well, how long have you been doing it?
Can we get back to misogynistic podcasts?
If it is the case,
can we get back to misogynistic podcasts? No, we're not.
If it is the case that it is your criticism.
Can we get back to misogynistic podcasts?
If you're going to have criticisms for whatever, I'm going to have criticisms for your podcast.
You haven't even listened to it, so don't talk about it.
Do I need to?
Pull it up and
I can listen to it from you.
Go ahead, pull it up on YouTube.
I can listen to it from you.
Go ahead and pull it up on YouTube. You have not watched my podcast, so don't sit here. We're not going to critique my podcast.
Why not?
Because you haven't even watched it.
Let's watch it.
Go ahead, pull it up.
So if we pull up your
45
podcast
minutes
right now, I can
45 minutes, 45 minutes put on 2 times speed, and then we can critique my podcast. But until then, tell me about another non-misogynistic red pill podcast.
Well, I don't think any of those are misogynistic podcasts.
Yeah, of course not.
You got to demonstrate that they actually hate these women.
This is where Andrew Wilson really shines. Andrew Wilson is just sitting back cool as ice while the guy melts down. Andrew Wilson doesn't even have to do much, just lets the guy implode. And Andrew Wilson's refusal to entertain nonsense, unless it's based in facts, man, that's how you win a debate without raising your voice once.
By their actions, by the things, everything that's happening right there.
Yeah, so let's go through some more of these.
When Myron Gaines has a college table that says women deserve less, you don't think that's a little misogynistic?
Is that during his podcast?
He is one of the red pill content creators that we're talking about.
I had to be a podcast.
Dude,
I thought I had to be a podcast.
Can you
now
act
it
like
doesn't
an
have
adult?
to be a podcast?
Can you act like an adult? That is the most childish thing I've ever seen in my whole life.
You gave me the criteria.
The criteria is the content creators, including Myron Gaines. Yes, I've always said that. So, nothing's changed in my statement.
As we're talking about dating podcasts, or the idea of dating,
correct?
Is it also possible there's just not that many?
Andrew Wilson pins him on his own rules. Andrew Wilson reminds him word for word what he said earlier, and the guy just folds. Andrew Wilson exposes how the guy keeps shifting the goalposts. You can literally feel the silence from the other side. Andrew Wilson didn't just win, he dominated.
Yeah, there's not a lot of red pill podcasts.
Just dating podcasts.
There's a ton of dating podcasts.
Okay, name some.
Mine.
Name some other ones.
There's a guy named Man We're in Trouble. There's Evie Edit. There's
Evie Edit's a dating podcast.
Yeah, she talks about dating and men and women.
Is it a dating podcast though?
Yes.
So they have.
This isn't a dating podcast.
So hang on. So they have.
This isn't a dating podcast.
So on Evie Edit, they have. Every single time they come on, they have multitudes of people on with them, and all they talk about is...
I didn't necessarily say they have guests. I'm not talking about the format. I'm saying that's what the content that comes up is men and women, and this is not a dating podcast that we're currently on.
So you're just talking about, for you, a dating podcast, just anybody who's talking about dating.
This is not a dating podcast that we're currently on.
Well, prove it.
I just did.
How? Let's go through more.
You want me to read them? So here, why don't we do the first one? Whether women should be submissive, I don't
understand how would that not be? Yeah, actually, how would that not be a decent question to ask for dating? I don't get it.
Do you ask that on your first dates?
What, if a woman would be submissive?
Yeah.
No.
Exactly, because it's not a dating question.
Why would that? Wait, hang on. Let's back up. Let's assume for a second that anything that I would ask a woman on the first date isn't something you would ask a woman on the first date. What does that prove?
I'm saying the things you guys do. Do you think you're going to look better in 10 years? Do you think you're going to look better in 10 years? Is that something you asked on the date?
My question.
What's your body count? Do you ask that on the first date?
Can you answer my question?
Do you ask what's a body count on the first date?
Before you start shotgunning.
Yeah, you have different questions.
Before you start shotgunning questions.
You have different questions.
I'll never answer one of yours if you never answer one of mine.
Go ahead, Andrew.
So here we go again. What does it actually prove? What does it prove that if I asked a whole sequence of different questions from you on my first date, what does that prove?
Yeah, you're not asking these questions on your first date.
Can you answer my question?
I just did.
What does it prove?
It proves that you're not asking these questions on your first date.
So it doesn't prove anything?
It does prove it.
What does it prove?
That you're not asking these kinds of questions on your first date.
So what is that proving outside of that?
It proves that these are more misogynistic questions.
Hang on, does it also prove that I don't ask any other questions other people would ask that you're not asking here?
I have no idea if it proves that or
it's
not.
just so stupid, dude. It proves nothing.
Okay.
What does it prove?
What do those questions prove?
Nothing. They don't prove anything.
Okay.
Andrew Wilson absolutely ran circles around his opponent. Every point Andrew Wilson made was backed with logic, consistency, and confidence. While the other guy got emotional and scrambled, Andrew Wilson stayed. Clear, calm, and surgical. This wasn't even close. Andrew Wilson showed up, shut it down, and walked away with the win.